in the forest and the banks of the river Brahmana. It's the appearance day of Sri Govinda Ghosh today. So I'll just read a little bit about me before I start the fast. Sri Govinda Ghosh. Sri Govinda Ghosh was known for his sweet kirtans at the annual Jagannath Rath Yatra festival. He and his two brothers, Vasudeva and Madhava, are eternal associates with Sri Krishna and Sri Jayananda. The Lord would immediately begin dancing whenever the Ghosh brothers would sing. The Ghosh brothers preached throughout their lives with music and song. Sri Govinda Ghosh established the Gopinath temple in Agravi. Since he had no children, Govinda wondered who would perform his funeral rites. Sri Gopinath, the deity, appeared in a dream, promising that he himself would do everything. Still today, the Gopinath deity arranges for the Jayananda Mahotsava, this appearance day festival of his pure devotee. As Kalavati Shakti, Govinda Ghosh swings sweetly over Radha Govinda in Goloka Vrindavan. The Samadhi is in Vrindavan. Sri Govinda Ghosh, Ki Jai. So, reading from Sri Prabhupada's Leela Rita, he built a house in which the whole world could live. Which covered that Ki Jai. He built a house in which the whole world could live. On October 18th, he left Butler via Philadelphia for New York City. Sally Agarwal. After a month, I really loved the Swami. I felt protective in a way, and he wanted to go to Philadelphia. But I couldn't imagine, I told him, I could not imagine him going to Philadelphia for 2 days. He was going to speak there and then to New York. But he knew no one in New York. If the thing didn't pan out in Philadelphia, he was just going to New York. And then there was no one. I just couldn't imagine, it made me sick. I remember the night he was leaving, about 2 in the morning. I remember sitting there as long as he could wait before Gopal took him to Pittsburgh to get on that bus. Gopal was a handful of change, and I remember telling him how to put the money in the stock so that he could take a bath at the bus station, because he was supposed to take a bath a few times a day. And Gopal told him how to do that, and told him about the automats in New York. He told him what he could eat and what he couldn't eat, and he gave him these coins in their stock. And that's how he left us with.
Bhaktivedanta Swami, and no one he had a contact. Dr. Ramamurti Mishra. He had written Dr. Mishra from Cobbler, enclosing a letter of an introduction at a friend living in Bombay. He had also phoned Dr. Mishra to welcome Bhaktivedanta Swami to join in New York. At the Port Authority bus terminal, a student of Dr. Mishra's met him as he arrived in Philadelphia and escorted him directly to an Indian festival in the city. There, Bhaktivedanta Swami met Dr. Mishra, as well as Ravi Shankar and his brother, the dancer Uday Shankar. Bhaktivedanta Swami then accompanied Dr. Mishra to his apartment at 33 Riverside Drive, beside the Hudson River. The apartment was on the 14th floor and had large windows overlooking the river. Dr. Mishra gave Bhaktivedanta Swami a room to himself. Dr. Mishra was a dramatic, showy personality, given to flashy dances and expressive gestures with his hands. He regularly used words like lovely and beautiful, presenting an artfully polished image of what a guru should be. He was what some New Yorkers refer to as an uptown Swami. Although a sannyasi, he did not wear the traditional saffron dhoti and kurta, but instead wore tailored Nehru jackets and white slacks. His complexion was dark, whereas Bhaktivedanta Swami's was golden, and he had thick black hair. At 44, he was young enough to be Bhaktivedanta Swami's son. Dr. Mishra had been suffering from bad health when Bhaktivedanta Swami came into his life, and Bhaktivedanta Swami's arrival seemed the perfect medicine. Ramamurti Mishra, His Holiness Prabhupada Bhaktivedanta Goswamiji really knocked me down with love. He was really an incarnation of love. My body had become a skeleton, and he really brought me back to life. His cooking, and especially his love and devotion, and his devotion to Lord Krishna. I was very lazy in the matter of cooking, but he would get up and have ready. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, chapter 1, first canto, chapter 5, text 14. Yeah. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, Canto 1, Chapter 5, Text 14. Tato, Nyatha, Kinchana, Yad, Vivaksata. Tato, Nyatha, Kinchana, Yad, Vivaksata. Pratag, Drishash, Tat, Krita, Rupa, Namabi. Pritag, Drishash, Tat, Krita, Rupa, Namabi. Na, Kahichit, Vapi, Cha, Duhish, Shita, Matir, Nakach, Kahachit, Kvapi, Cha, Dushita, Matir. Labita, Vatahata, Naho, Vivash Padam. Labita, Vatahata, Naha, Vivash Padam. Tato Nyatha, Kinchana Yad Vivashata. Pratag Drishash, Tat Krita Rupa Nahamavi. Nakarichik Kavapi, Chat Dhishtita, Matir. Labita, Vatahata, Na Vivashpata. Jagdishash Kati Namabi. Nakarichik Kavapi, Chat Dhishtita, Matir. Labita, Vatahata, Na Vivashpata. Pitagdrishash Kritakripa Ramabi Akahichik Gavapi Chadushita Matir Abita Vatahata Naha Irishpadam Tatonyata Kichana Yadvivakshata Pitagdrishash Kritakripa Ramabi Nakaichit Gavapi Kajushitat Matir Bita Navata Hata Naha Ivishpadam Tatonyata Kinchanana Yad Virakshata Pitagdrishas Kripa Rupanamabi Nakaichit Gvapi Kudishita Matir Abita Vata Hata Na Ivishpadam. So the word for word, tata, from that, anyatha, apart, kinchana, something, yat, whatsoever, vivaksata, desiring to describe, prithak, separately, drisha, vision, tatkrita, reactionary to that, rupa, form, namabi, by names, kahichit, never, kvapi, any, cha, and duhishita mati, oscillating mind, labita, gains, vata ahata, troubled by the wind, na, boat, eva, like, aspadam, place. So translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: whatever you desire to describe that is separate in vision from the Lord simply reacts with different forms, names, and results to agitate the mind as the wind agitates a boat which has no resting place. So I'll take you through the translation again. I'll just read a little part of it, and then you can read what I've just read, what I've just spoken back to you. Whatever you desire to describe that is separate in vision from the Lord simply reacts with different forms, names, and results to agitate the mind as the wind agitates a boat which has no resting place. So I'll just read the translation again. Whatever you desire to describe that is separate in vision from the Lord simply reacts with different forms, names, and results to agitate the mind as the wind agitates a boat which has no resting place. Purport: Sri Vyasadeva is the editor of all descriptions of the Vedic literatures, and thus he has described transcendental realization in different ways, namely by fruitive activities, speculative knowledge, mystic power, and devotional service. Besides that, in his various Puranas, he has recommended the worship of so many demigods in different forms and names. The result is that people in general are puzzled how to fix their minds in the service of the Lord. They are always disturbed about finding the real path of self-realization. Srila Narada is stressing this particular defect in the Vedic literatures compiled by Vyasadeva, and thus he is trying to emphasize describing everything in relation with the Supreme Lord and no one else. In fact, There is nothing existent except the Lord. The Lord is manifested in different expansions. He is the root of the complete tree. He is the stomach of the complete body. Pouring water on the root is the right process to water the tree, as much as feeding the stomach supplies energy to all parts of the body. Therefore, Srila Vyasadeva should not have compiled any Puranas other than the Bhagavat Purana, because a slight deviation from that may create havoc in self-realization. If a slight deviation can create such havoc, then what to speak of deliberate expansion of the ideas separate from the absolute truth, personality of Godhead? The most effective part of worshipping demigods is that it creates a definite conception of pantheism, ending disastrously in many religious sects, detrimental to the progress of the principles of the Bhagavatam, which alone can give the accurate direction for self-realization in eternal relation with the personality of Godhead by devotional service in transcendental love. The example of the boat disturbed by whirling wind is suitable in this respect. The diverted mind of the pantheist can never reach the perfection of self-realization due to the disturbed condition of the selection of object. Jnana Tiramandasya Janajana Salakaya Chakshurum Militanyena Tasmai Shri Gurudev Namaha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagat Pate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gurange Radha Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamani Hare Priya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Parunitananda Shri Advaita Gadara Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. So welcome everybody to this class. I'll try to speak a little bit about the verse and hopefully leave you with some good impressions. So I'll open with a few quotes from Prabhupada. The first quote is on why we should read the Bhagavad Gita, then the Srimad Bhagavatam. That is because first one has to understand who Krishna is. One has to have a clear concept that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That understanding comes from studying the Bhagavad Gita. It is the scripture where the Supreme Personality of Godhead is speaking about himself. Therefore, what can be a better source of understanding him? However, when a great person speaks about himself, he cannot say very much about his own glory. He feels rather embarrassed. But those who love him, when they speak about him, they go all the way to glorify him. Srimad Bhagavatam is a scripture where the devotees of Krishna are speaking about his glory. Therefore, the real glory and greatness of Krishna and the sweetness of his activities have become most wonderfully manifest in Srimad Bhagavatam. When one has this clear understanding that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then one can read any scripture and relish its transcendental sweetness. So that's quotes from Ocean of Mercy by Bhakti Charu Swami. Another quote, the process of Krishna consciousness is perfect. Just follow this process with all sincerity. Offer this life to Krishna and try to serve him to the best of your ability. Try to develop your love for him and the rest will automatically happen. So another Srila Prabhupada quote, if you sell diamonds, you cannot expect to have many customers, but a diamond is a diamond even if there are no customers. So interesting. I think that if you're looking for diamonds, and really is there anyone who isn't looking for diamonds, then look here in the Srimad Bhagavatam and you'll be able to get a big supply of spiritual diamonds. You can also relate this quote to Prabhupada's position in his life at the time that he was compiling this commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam. He was in the sannyasi order of spiritual life, renounced order of life, when he was totally dependent on Krishna. This renunciation and dependency on Krishna means that he was struggling very hard to fulfill his spiritual master's orders, that he should preach the message of Lord Chaitanya to the English-speaking world. Prabhupada always said that he didn't really write his books. Krishna wrote them. He really did believe this, and sometimes he would listen as his disciples read his books to him. He also said that we should try to shed gallons of blood in making new devotees. And his spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami, also said this quote: "I wish that every selfless, tender-hearted person of the Gaudiya Math will be prepared to shed 200 gallons of blood for the nourishment of the spiritual corpus of every individual of this world." So let's examine this particular spiritual diamond, this particular chapter of the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. This particular chapter of the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam is called Narada's Instructions on Srimad Bhagavatam. This Narada is Narada Muni, the transcendental singer and musician who shouts the Lord's name constantly and purifies the whole universe. So what does Muni mean? Muni means a sage, even a great sage, an ascetic, a spiritual scholar, a self-realized soul, or one who endeavors to approach the absolute truth by dint of mental process. Narada Muni is also a portent of supreme spiritual good fortune. He travels everywhere playing his veena and constantly vibrating the Maha Mantra. He is the original spiritual master. So there was one time when, in the early days of ISKCON in New York City, I think it was, when Srila Prabhupada's disciples had booked him a really grand hall to deliver a lecture in, and they really sort of tried to publicize the event, that Srila Prabhupada would be speaking at the event. However, sadly, that no member of the public came to the event, and after the event had finished, the disciples were sort of trying to convey the sorrows to Srila Prabhupada, that they were sorry that nobody had come to listen to hear him lecture. So Srila Prabhupada replied that actually there were people who came to listen to him. Narada Muni came, and Brahma came to listen to me. And in respect of this statement, in the Soho Street Temple in London, there's actually a Vyasa-san on one side of the deities and a Vyasa-san on the other side of the deities. And one of the Vyasa-sans is for Narada Muni, and the other one is for Lord Brahma. I'll just relate a little story about Narada Muni. The story is called The Brahmana and the Cobbler. So once Narada Muni came upon a Brahmana, and this Brahmana asked him, the next time that he went to see Krishna, could he inquire from Krishna when this particular Brahmana would be going back to Godhead? So Narada Muni then came upon a cobbler, and a cobbler, sorry, I should say a little bit about the Brahmana's condition. This Brahmana, he was a really pukka Brahmana who really sort of upheld all the features of a Brahmana's spiritual realization, and he was very forthright in the way that he upheld the scriptures in his life. And then Narada Muni came upon a cobbler. Now a cobbler would live a sort of a very frugal existence, shall we say. But anyway, this cobbler inquired from Narada Muni, the next time that you see Lord Krishna, will you please ask him when I shall be going back to Godhead? And so Narada Muni then Narada Muni then, when Narada Muni met Krishna, he inquired from him, when will this Brahmana be going back to Godhead? And Krishna replied, not for 200 lifetimes at least. Then Narada Muni inquired, when will this cobbler be going back to Godhead? And Lord Krishna replied, at the very end of this life, he'll be going back to meet me. And so Narada Muni then traveled back to Earth, and he met the cobbler, and the cobbler inquired from him, when you saw Lord Krishna, what was Lord Krishna engaged in? And Narada Muni replied, he was threading elephants through the eye of a needle. And the cobbler was really overcome with this. He started weeping and said, my Lord is so wonderful, he can do anything. My Lord is so wonderful, he can do anything. And Narada Muni was a little bit puzzled by this, so he asked the cobbler, he say that Krishna can do anything, but how can you see that in your everyday life? And the cobbler had a seed from a banyan tree, and he pointed to the banyan tree and said, Krishna is so wonderful that he can put a whole banyan tree inside this little banyan tree seed. My Lord is so wonderful that he can do absolutely anything. So let's examine this particular sloka more closely. And the key sentence to the purport is Shri Shri Kodnitai Maya Posashi Ki Jai. So the key sentence from the purport is Shri Naradev is stressing this particular defect in the Vedic literatures compiled by Vyasadeva. Thus, he is trying to emphasize describing everything in relation with the Supreme Lord and no one else. And the emphasis must be on trying to emphasize describing everything in relation to the Supreme Lord and no one else. So we should note the similarity of this sloka, the similarity in tone with a seed verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. This verse is second canto, chapter 9, verse 34. Riti ritham yat pratyateta, na priyatayata chat mahani, tad vidyad atmano mayam, yat yatha baso yatha tamar. O Brahma, whatever appears to be of any value, if it is without relation, to me has no reality. No, it is my illusory energy, that reflection which appears to be in darkness. So we should also note that pure devotional service is defined by this sloka. Anya bilishita shunyam, jnana kamadi anavritam, anakuyena krishnanano, shilanam bhakti uttama. One should render transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord Krishna favorably, and without desire for material profit or gain through fruitive activities or philosophical speculation. That is called pure devotional service. So there are also 6 characteristics of pure devotional service. The first one is that pure devotional service brings immediate relief from all kinds of material distress. Secondly, pure devotional service is the beginning of all auspiciousness. Third, pure devotional service automatically puts one in transcendental pleasure. Fourth, pure devotional service is rarely achieved. Fifth, those in pure devotional service derive even the conception of liberation. And lastly, pure devotional service is the only means to attract Krishna. So in the purport, it mentions demigod worship. So demigod worship is dealt with in the Bhagavad Gita. In chapter 7, knowledge of the absolute, verses 20 to 23. And Prabhupada comments that less intelligent people who have lost their spiritual sense take shelter of demigods for their immediate fulfillment of material desires. Krishna describes that those who are alpa medisanam, that is of those of small intelligence worship the demigods. Men of small intelligence worship the demigods. Srila Prabhupada comments that worshippers of demigods are less intelligent because they don't know to what part of the body food must be supplied. Some of them are so foolish that they claim that there are many parts and many ways to supply food. So this is the same analogy that's used in this purport to this sloka, that he is the stomach of the complete body. The idea is that by giving food to the stomach, one gives sustenance to the whole body. And there's also a part in the purport about Srila Vyasadeva is the editor of all description of the Vedic literature. This is in respect of the controversy that states that one man couldn't have written all the Vedas. However, Sri Vyasadeva utilized his extraordinary intelligence and many disciples to produce his works. Therefore, it is the consummate conclusion of Vaishnava scientists and other thoughtful persons that the vast Vedic scriptures were transcribed under the dictation and personal supervision of Srila Vyasadeva, making him their actual author and writer. So I'll just talk a little bit about the Puranas, but I've got a question for the class first. There's a very famous song that we sing, and it's connected with Narada Muni, and it's taken from the Padma Purana. Does anybody know which song it is? No, it's spoken by Satyavata Muni in a conversation with Narada Muni and Shanaka Rishi. That's right. Yeah. So that's found in the Padma Purana. So I'll just speak a little bit about the Puranas. So the first bit about the Puranas is taken from Vedic paradigm. So in there it says that the Puranas are part of the Vedas. Generally, they are called the fifth Veda, also known as Smriti Prasthana. The fifth Veda also includes such works as the Samhitas, the Ramayana, and the Mahabharata, including the Bhagavad Gita. The Puranas and the Mahabharata were made from related historical facts which explain the teaching of the four Vedas, the Atharva, Rig, Yajur, and Samavedas. The Puranas can be considered to be histories. A Purana must contain 10 characteristic topics. Firstly, the creation of this universe. Secondly, the subsequent creation of worlds and beings. Thirdly, the maintenance of all living beings. Fourthly, their sustenance. Fifthly, the rule of various manus. Sixthly, the dynasties of great kings. 7, the activities of such kings. 8th, annihilation. 9th, motivation. And finally, the supreme shelter. There are 18 major Puranas, 18 secondary Puranas. The 18 major Puranas are the Brahma, Padma, Vishnu, Shiva, Linga, Garuda, Narada, Bhagavat Purana, the Agni Purana, the Skanda, Bhavishya, Brahma Vaivata, Markandeya, Vamana, Varata, and Matsya Puranas. Kurma and Brahmanda Puranas. So 6 Puranas are meant for those in the mode of goodness. 6 Puranas are for those in the mode of passion. And 6 Puranas are for those in the mode of ignorance. So the Padma Purana is for those in the mode of goodness. Because there are many different types of men, there are many different Vedic literatures. In the Vedic literatures, there are descriptions of rituals and ceremonies in which a goat may be sacrificed in the presence of the goddess Kali. This is described in the Markandeya Purana, where this Purana is meant for the instruction of those in the mode of ignorance. So this part about the Puranas was taken from Wikipedia. So it says, the Puranas altogether consist of 400,000 verses. There are Maha and Upper minor Puranas. So the Padma Purana consists of 55,000 verses. The Shiva Purana, 24,000 verses. So the Shiva Purana primarily discusses Shiva and Parvati. Once consisted of 100,000 verses, but was abridged by Vyasa Dev before being taught to Roma Rahashana. So the Skanda Purana, this is the longest Purana, it's 81,100 verses. And it's described as being an extraordinarily meticulous pilgrimage guide containing geographical locations of pilgrimage centers in India with related legends, parables, hymns, and stories. The Vamana Purana, 10,000 verses, describes North India, particularly the Himalaya foothills region. The Brahma Vaivata Purana, 18,000 verses, centers around the greatness of Radha and Krishna. So I'll try to speak a little bit about the meaning of the sloka. I'll just read the sloka again. Whatever you desire to describe that is separate in vision from the Lord, simply reacts with different forms, names, and results to agitate the mind as the wind agitates a boat which has no resting place. So this is the meaning of the sloka, that one should try to describe everything in relation to the Supreme Lord and no one else. There's also a little piece in the sloka about how the wind agitates a boat which has no resting place. That's made me think a little bit about boats, winds, and resting places, because a resting place for a boat is a harbour. So a boat that has no resting place means a boat out at sea. And a storm at sea can be an absolutely dreadful event. Has anybody ever been at sea when there's been a storm? And it's said that there's no atheist in the trenches. Well, I can assure you that when there's a boat being tossed by a storm, there's absolutely no atheists in that boat either. And if the mind is agitated like that, so there's many a ship that's gone to Davy Jones' locker through trying to sail through a gale. I wonder if Prabhupada ever remembered this particular sloka when he was at sea on the Jaladuta. So the conclusion must be that the wind can agitate a boat to a very high degree. So similarly, can anybody see the danger in describing that which is separate in vision from the Lord? This particular defect in the Vedic literatures compiled by Vyasadeva, it must be considered to be a pretty grave defect. In the purport, these fruitive activities, speculative knowledge, mystic power, and devotional service, these things roughly correspond with the process of karma yoga, jnana yoga, also known as Ashtanga yoga, and finally bhakti yoga. So when in the purport it says, the progress of the principles of the Bhagavatam, which alone can give the accurate direction for self-realization in eternal relation with the personality of Godhead by devotional service in transcendental love. That devotional service in transcendental love can also be called bhakti yoga. And make no mistake, Narada Muni and Sri Vyasadeva were both perfectly aware of this process of bhakti yoga. Otherwise, why would it be mentioned in text 35 of this chapter? where it's described as Bhakti Yoga Samanvita. Whatever work is done here in this life for the satisfaction of the mission of the Lord is called Bhakti Yoga, or transcendental loving service to the Lord. So I'll just make a few points about this chapter, and then I'll finish. So this chapter, the fifth chapter of the first canto, is called Narada's Instructions of Srimad Bhagavatam for Vyasadeva. And the first half of the chapter is just that. The second half is Narada Muni talking about his last incarnation. Narada Muni is in his third incarnation. In the first, he was a Gandharva, but committed an offense to a demigod and was cursed to take birth as a Sudra. And he's telling the birth of his story as a Shudra in this chapter. So there are many classic slokas in this chapter. 10 and 11 are the first ones that really stand out. It's pretty difficult to pick slokas that stand out, because this chapter is amongst the cream of Vedic literature. But also to be considered as classic are verses 22, 23, and also verse 40. So Srila Prabhupada's purports in the chapter, they deal mainly with the question of spiritual identity, although this question is dealt with in great depth and with full spiritual maturity. So if you're not already familiar with this chapter, I would suggest that you make yourself familiar with it at the earliest opportunity, as the subject matter is easily digestible. It's not too hard to comprehend at all, really. So that's my class. So thanks for your attention. If anyone's got any questions or comments they would like to make, I'll try and answer these comments. Or if they've got any questions for me. Mm-hmm. I think it appears to be in darkness to the onlooker, really. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In darkness. So self-realized, then it wouldn't appear to be in darkness, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I just read a similar prayer by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and he was saying that if anything that you see, if you see it as a separate entity from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then you're an illusion. So, and when we say, remembering Krishna all the time, that means seeing everything as part of Him, isn't it?
Definitely not. No. Yeah. Yeah, this sort of bears witness to his shedding gallons of blood for the well-being of the spiritual corpus, really. Yeah. Yeah, it's also it's really essential reading is this first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, because in the purport, when he's speaking on spiritual identity, he can describe it in so many different ways, and it's not so difficult to understand. And you just have to dip into it a little, and you'll get a lot of realization from it. When I was reading the purport out to in the beginning, I was surprised by how many pains he takes to describe the sort of the pure vision. It's saying that the result is that people in general are puzzled how to fix their minds in the service of the Lord. They're always disturbed about finding the real path of self-realization. But it must be that he really knows very well what the real path of self-realization is. It's not demigod worship or anything else, but really sort of it's not anything else but the accurate direction for self-realization in eternal relation with the personality of Godhead by devotional service in transcendental love. So it says here that the principles of the Bhagavatam, which alone can give the accurate direction for self-realization. So this self-realization has to be in eternal relation with the personality of Godhead by devotional service and transcendental love. And it says, in fact, there is nothing existent apart except the Lord. The Lord is manifested in different expansions. In fact, there is nothing existent except the Lord. So it's as soft as a rose, but as hard as a thunderbolt, really, isn't it? Really, if you have the eyes to see what is really getting at, it's quite a revelation, really. Any comments or questions? To agitate the mind as the wind agitates a boat which has no resting place. Yeah, thank you, thanks. Thank you. Thank you, thanks. Yeah, in the Bhagavad Gita, he sort of he's talking about the Karma Kanda part of the Vedas, isn't it? Really, when he's sort of in the Karma Kanda part of the Vedas, it gives some directions for self-realization, but it's not as pure as it could be, so you've put me on the spot slightly, but so it does say that demigod worship is okay, but it's not the best process, really. So it's a beginning, but it shouldn't be the end. Okay, thank you. Thanks. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Sri Prabhupada ki jai. Sri Shikod Nitai Maya Posashe ki jai.